Welcome to the Drum Shuffle, a podcast offering insights, perspectives, and conversations for drummers. I'm your host, Jamey Eads.
Hey, how's it going out there, everybody? Welcome to the Drum Shuffle Podcast. Jamey Eads joining you as I do each and every week. This is episode 148. I hope all of you guys are having a fantastic week out there in the world. We're having a great week over here at the Drum Shuffle World headquarters. I'm going to be joined by Anthony Taddeo in just a moment with a fantastic interview and probably one of the most unique projects that I have ever interviewed for here on this podcast. So he'll be joining us right after this message from our sponsor, Los Cabos Drumsticks. The best kept secret for drummers is finally out. Los Cabos drumsticks may look like the sticks you grew up with, but these are not your father's drumsticks. Los Cabos Drumsticks is Canada's #1 drumstick brand, and they are coming to a retailer near you. With operations in over 28 countries worldwide, thousands of drummers have already discovered the Los Cabos difference. Using FSC certified wood from Canada and the US, Los Cabos make the finest quality drumsticks, percussion tools, and accessories on the market. The best news, Los Cabos Drumsticks offers you a ton of choice. They have 22 individual drumstick models and 14 percussion tools, many of which are available in 3 different wood types: maple, white hickory, and red hickory. Red hickory comes from the center or heart of the hickory tree and has been independently proven to be both stronger and more elastic than white hickory without adding a lot of weight. While most drumstick manufacturers have shunned red hickory, Los Cabos Drumsticks has embraced it, becoming the only established stick brand in the world to offer a full line of red hickory drumsticks. To learn more about Los Cabos Drumsticks, visit them online at loscabosdrumsticks.com, follow them on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, and don't forget to ask for Los Cabos Drumsticks at your favorite retailer. Dare to be different. Join the Red Hickory Revolution with Los Cabos Drumsticks. All right, everybody. As I mentioned before our break there, we're going to be joined by Anthony Taddeo in just a moment. I'll be completely honest, I was not familiar with Anthony's playing before this opportunity presented itself to me. And the project that he came on to talk about is Alla Boara. I hope I'm saying that correct. Italian is not my native tongue, but it's such a unique project, and Anthony can probably do a better job explaining it than I can, but he has gone back and selected a bunch of really, really old Italian folk music that he has then composed around, and it truly is a fantastic record. And I hope that you guys in my crowd will give this a chance, because I didn't know what to expect going into it, but I thoroughly enjoyed listening to the record a few times, and will continue to do so going forward. But that project will be out on October 21st. And I got to tell you, I just had such a good time talking with Anthony about drumming in general and this project in particular. I know you're going to get a lot out of it. So help me welcome to the Drum Shuffle, Anthony Taddeo. Hey, good afternoon, Anthony. How's it going, man?
It is going great. Thank you so much, Jamey.
Oh, man, thanks for taking time to come on the Drum Shuffle podcast. I appreciate it. As we were just discussing in our, when I first called, you're going to have to help me get through this and educate me a bit on what it is that you do. I understand that you're a drummer and a percussionist, but we're going to talk about your new release, and you're going to have to help me out a little bit, if you don't mind, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, man. By the end of this interview, we'll be having like a cappuccino and some pasta or something. It's gonna be great.
Awesome. That'll be fantastic. Awesome. Well, so again, thanks for taking time to come on. I do appreciate it. Traditionally what I try to do with the podcast is, go back to your early years. I know you're currently calling Cleveland home. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, we moved back here in 2014 after we had spent 5 years in New York City.
Okay, gotcha. Now, is the Cleveland area, is that home for you?
It is, yeah. That was part of the reason why we wanted to move back, was because we wanted to start a family, which, update, I now have 2 incredible kids. And, we moved back here for that purpose, because we both have, our parents are like 20 minutes from each other, so.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that makes sense. And, I just I got to visit the big city, the Big Apple, in July. My daughter was up there doing some college visits. So, Cleveland's still a pretty big city, but it's not New York big. So
it's not. It is not. It is not. I know that's going to shock many of your listeners, but it is not. Yeah.
No, it's all good, man. Okay. So when did music, do you come from a musical family? When did that start in your life? Did you start playing at an early age?
Unfortunately, I was actually really late to the game as far as playing music, but kind of my passion for music and rhythm started really young. When I was 5, I started tap dancing, actually. And through, over the next 10 years, I kept adding things that I was doing, whether it be theater or singing or piano, and then finally drums. And at the center of all my passions was music and rhythm. And so then when it came time to kind of decide what I wanted to do with my career, I landed on drums because, one, that was the thing I felt like I was most advanced with at that moment in time, but also I loved the longevity that came with being a musician. I remember very vividly seeing this clip of Roy Haynes playing a drum solo when he was in his mid-80s. And I thought to myself, at the same time I had a friend who was also a dancer who had hurt her leg and her career was over before it ever really started.
Yeah.
And I was looking at the two, contrasting them and saying, I think I want to go with the one where you never have to retire. You just can do it forever. And that's always been an inspiration to me.
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, I mentioned we were in New York doing college visits. My daughter is a, pre-professional ballet dancer, and she's 17, and I tell her all the time, make sure you make the most of it, because your career is probably going to end by the time you're 30. It's just,
yeah.
The athleticism that's needed. It's kind of like being an NFL player. It really is. You get about 10 good years after college, and that's about it. So to your point, seeing Roy, doing what he did, almost up until he was 90 years old is pretty amazing.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And you're not wrong. It is a very athletic art form. It is incredible.
Yeah. Well, I think it depends on what kind of drumming you do as well. How long you can do it. If you're doing jazz, yeah, but I look at...
Right, that's a good point. Absolutely.
I look at guys like, I don't know, Dave Grohl, just as an example. I don't think you can play like that well into your 70s. Maybe you can, but, I'm in my mid-40s, and I have aches and pains after a long session or, a long show. So, I think you have to have good technique, right? And that's the key to a long career. So, bringing it back to you, when you started playing, did you take lessons locally to develop that technique, or are you self-taught?
Yeah, so I've got my first drum set when I was 13. And at that time I was fairly self-taught, but then I was studying with a couple people around town, more notably someone I started studying with when I was starting to get some general academics together at a local community college, was Jamey Haddad. I don't know if you're familiar with that name, but
man.
he,
Monster.
he's a serious drummer, and he's right here in Cleveland. And I remember the first time I saw him at a show, he was playing with also a trumpet player from Cleveland named Dominic Farinacci, and I was so blown away by his voice on the drums and the hand percussion. And I never knew that people like that even existed in Cleveland, So I knew right away that I wanted to study with him. And I would say Jamey, out of all the teachers that I've ever studied with, is probably the one that I would identify as like my quote unquote musical father.
Yeah, word, man. That's awesome to have somebody like that. And he's just a monster player. So you studied with him for a while, I would assume.
Yeah. Yep. I was studying with Jamey right up until I moved to New York City.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, when you decided to make the move to New York City, and I say this in a lot of interviews to cats that move to New York City, you go from being, I don't know, say a really busy drummer in Cleveland, and you move to New York and you realize that there are tons of monster players that can't find work. Did you experience any of that?
I think the biggest thing for me in New York was by the last couple of years I was there, I was actually gigging quite a bit because I had kind of found the right circle of people. I think the hardest and most challenging thing about New York when you first get there is realizing what you're not. In Cleveland, for instance, growing up here, I had enough connections where maybe I could play like a salsa gig on congas because I had like enough conga technique together to get through a gig. But you can't do that in New York City. You're not just going to pick up a random gig playing congas with a salsa group unless you are like from the place where that music originates. You know what I mean? Like unless you've been playing that music since you were like 3 years old. And what's so beautiful about that is it like informs you who you are largely by informing you who you're not. So it was a real eye-opening experience in that way, and something that I wouldn't trade the world for, because that I think was my favorite part about being there, was just realizing like, okay, this is my voice. This is like where I actually fit in the scene here, and these are the things that really move me and I want to keep working toward, instead of like spreading myself too thin and trying to just do everything, if that makes any sense.
No, I think it makes perfect sense because, I think, if you go to New York as a jazz player, for example, and you're having a hard time finding jazz gigs and you join a punk band, you're essentially just resigning all future jazz gigs.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, because you fall into, now you're like the punk drummer,
Right.
And so anytime one of their friends asks them, like, who's a good drummer I can get for this punk rock gig, they're going to have this list of punk drummers in New York. Yeah, you're totally right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I think you have to, know what your niche is and immediately just, inject yourself into that niche when you get to a place like New York, LA, Nashville. There's other cities that are that way, but you really have to be in that circle to be mentioned for gigs and to work, right?
Totally.
It's just not an easy thing to break in. So when you got to New York, you said by the last couple of years you were pretty busy. Were you studying with anybody while you were up there? Were you going to school up there? Or did you literally go to New York to just try to gig?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I actually went to finish my undergrad degree in New York. So I finished my last 2 years of my undergrad at the New School.
Okay.
And that's where I met I met so many incredible musicians there that I still stay in contact with. But, so I was there for 2 years, and then the last 3 years was just me gigging as much as I could. And I fell into a group of different singer-songwriters and artists that were creating this really creative music. The one that I ended up spending the most time with, her name was Rachel Brotman, and John Raymond, who is an incredible trumpet player, was also in that group. And that was a really kind of important experience for me, because I also learned how to like co-write these pieces, and it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about, again, just like my artistic voice and the kind of stuff that motivated me. And so that was really cool. Actually, when I was in New York, I almost stopped playing jazz completely, just because, like you were saying before, I started playing with this group of different songwriters that weren't really doing jazz. I mean, there's a lot of crossover. There's like electronic and soul stuff happening in there. And there were still like odd meters and things like that I loved playing, but it was definitely not like straight ahead jazz. And then when I moved, it wasn't until I moved back to Cleveland that I started playing a ton of jazz again, because that's what the scene is like here. So I started doing that.
Yeah. Well, so I don't know if you've ever noticed, but I tend to go down every rabbit hole that I see. So you brought something up. You talked about, composing and co-writing. All of the drummers that I've ever had on the show that compose and write, I always ask this question, and it's almost always the same answer. So we're going to quiz you real quick. When you sit down to write, do you start rhythmically or do you start melodically?
That, to me, it's actually always different. I would say the majority of the time, though, it's a melodic idea, because I love melody. And I think as a drummer, one thing that I've worked on really, really hard is how do I make the drums as melodic as possible. That's one of the things that I want to be at the forefront of my voice as a drummer. And so I'm always hearing melodies, and I love messing around with melodies. And then when it comes to messing around with the melodies, that's where, to me, the rhythm gets really exciting. But it's very infrequent where I start with like a groove or an ostinato for a piece. And for this newest project, for the Alla Boara project, it's always starting with melodies, because I'm usually rearranging these melodies that I'm finding on these field recordings.
Right. Well, and I find that so interesting. And, I don't want to make this about me, but, no, I really don't. But I do not have that gene to start melodically. I love melodies too. And I can maybe, hum something out to a guitarist if I hear something, but I'm always in the rhythmic aspect of what I'm trying to do. My brain just always goes there first. And all of these great composing drummers do the exact opposite of me. So I don't know if I was just born with, lizard brain or what the case is.
So at all.
But I find it so fascinating to me that you drummers that can write and compose, it always comes from a melodic place. And I'm so jealous of that. So that's why I bring it up. It's just infinitely, entertaining to me to hear that question answered. Yeah. So I don't know, but, so when you got back to Cleveland, you said you started playing a lot more jazz, and presumably you're still doing a lot of jazz gigs and keeping pretty busy. You said you've been back a couple of years now. What's the scene like in Cleveland these days? It's been a long time since I've been up that way.
Yeah, well, when we made the decision to move back, I kind of was thinking that it was going to be the end of a certain chapter in my career. I just figured that I wasn't going to be able to perform as much. And actually, it's been the exact opposite. since we've gotten back, I've been so blessed to find that a lot of musicians, a lot of young musicians, for the first time in a very long time, have stayed to invest in Cleveland, where it used to be, you would become good enough on your instrument that you'd be kind of an in-demand guy in Cleveland, and then you were off to New York City, to Chicago, to LA, to Nashville. And I'm happy to say that right now, we're kind of experiencing somewhat of a renaissance in Cleveland, where there are just so many incredible bands and musicians here. And I came back kind of right at the climax of that, and it's just been kind of riding this incredible wave. And I don't know. I feel very, very, very fortunate to be here right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's something to be said for that. I grew up in Central Kentucky, not exactly a hotbed of rock music, and I'm a rock guy, right? So, as soon as I could possibly get out, I got out. I went to Memphis and tried to make it down there. Because there was a good rock and blues scene down there at the time, and there was quite a few bands getting signed out of Memphis. But you always end up getting back to your roots, no matter what we're talking about. You always end up getting back to your roots. But the thing that I think of about Cleveland, obviously, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Alan Freed, and kind of the birthplace of the rock and roll movement in the 50s. I didn't know what kind of scene Cleveland had. So it's really cool to hear that, a lot of young cats are staying in town and really trying to build a scene. That says a lot, because there's not a lot of cities that can lay claim to something like that anymore.
I feel like there was a moment before the pandemic where New York and Chicago in particular were getting so expensive that it was just forcing musicians out, and we were kind of catching the people that were moving back home. You know what I mean? Or leaving from those two bigger cities. And so we've got a few people, like one of my favorite guitar players in town, Dan Bruce, spent a ton of time in Chicago, and then they moved back here because it just wasn't sustainable to stay out in Chicago. They had just had their second and third kid, which were twins, and that was really kind of like the knockout punch for them of staying in Chicago.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let me put your mind at ease. I was just in New York City the first week of July. Prices have not gone down due to the pandemic, I can assure you.
Yeah, I heard that there was a minute where it would dip down, but then it's kind of nuts again.
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking like, kind of a casual burger restaurant for the three of us to eat. It's like $78, for burgers and fries. It's nuts, so.
Oh my God.
So I get what you're saying. So
yeah,
talk to me a little bit about, the current project and where did Italian folk music come into focus for you? I doubt, and I don't know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I doubt you woke up one day and said, you know what I need to do? I need to do a very, deep traditional Italian folk music project. Maybe you did, but I doubt that's how that happened, right?
Yeah. The decision was not motivated by money either, if that's what you were thinking. I know.
Well, yeah, I know that the worldwide audience waiting for this release, but we do things because we love it, right? I mean, I don't care if 5 people hear it or 5 million people hear it, as long as, whatever that number is says, hey, that's really cool, right? That's all I care about. But
yeah, for me, it is really intertwined to who I am as a person. And it's kind of what's made this project the most special part of my music career right now, and that is because my dad is from Italy, and so I grew up taking great pride in my heritage. But it wasn't until I was at the new school and I was given a research paper to do research on a type of global music, and I picked Italy because I thought that was going to be a layup. And what I stumbled upon were these field recordings from this famous American ethnomusicologist, Alan Lomax, from 1954. He spent 6 months in Italy and traveled all around Italy, visiting the most obscure places and recording the most diverse and beautiful Italian folk music that you could imagine. And when I heard that stuff, I was just floored. I couldn't believe that I had spent my, up until that point, first 20-something years of my life without knowing that this music existed. And so the last 10 years have been me researching this on and off. I've spent some time in Italy. I've learned the language to a certain level of fluency, and I've, under the direction of some really incredible Italian frame drummers, I've even studied a lot of the traditional drum techniques that they use with their traditional hand drums in the Italian folk music. And I have to tell you, this is the first time in my whole career where I've found a project that feels so integrated to the person who I am and the music that I love, and it's and my heritage. It's just all this beautiful bundle of things that I care about. And so working on this and pursuing this project has just turned into something that is just joyful. It's been a beautiful experience so far.
Well, and I think you used the key word there, joyful, because as I listened to the record, and I gave it another listen today in preparation for our interview, it is a joyous music. Even, I think there's even, kind of a requiem on the album that, you would think it would still be sad music, but there is an underlying joy to all of the songs, which is interesting to me. And you talk about music that is integrated into your being. I'm of, English, Irish heritage, and living in Kentucky, you can't listen to bluegrass music without immediately hearing an Irish jig or a reel, right? I mean, they're all so interconnected. And, so I get what you're saying, and I hope that the folks that are listening in and eavesdropping on our conversation today have had some moment of that clarity of this is the music of my being kind of thing.
Yes. And I'm glad you say that, Jamey, because that is something that I didn't anticipate going into this project, but it's something that I've seen as a result of it. And that is that, at the center of the project, we want to bring recognition to this folk music that is largely unknown. And we want to bring new life to it as well. But ultimately, I want to inspire people of any ethnic heritage to dig into their musical roots and to find something about their musical heritage that inspires them, that shows them that their musical heritage is still a very fertile ground for creative cultivation. And I've been seeing some people come up after a show and they'll be like, wow, my great-grandfather is from France, and now my head is spinning thinking about all the music that he might have grown up listening to, and I'm gonna research that. Or my dad worked in a steel factory in Youngstown, Ohio, and he told me when I was growing up that they had songs that they used to sing in the steel factory, and now I want to know what those are. And I just think that is a beautiful thing, because it not only is it achieving this goal of, now you know about this Italian folk music, that's great, but hopefully it's also achieving this goal of bringing community and connectedness to one another through this music.
Yeah, man. And what a noble calling, right? I mean, there's no other way I can put it, but I just, I feel sorry for those that have never been able to make that sort of connection with music. Mm. I mean, there are certain albums that I can put on today and I go back to being 13 years old in my mom's basement. You know what I mean? Like I can, I can smell the room. I can see the lighting. It just transforms you right back to that moment in time. But it's a different thing when it's the music of your people, right? I mean, when it's so deeply tied to the heritage that you come from, I only hope that everybody gets to connect to that. And bravo to you for bringing something like this to life. Now, it leads me to my next question. When you decided to do this after doing your research, I'm sure you didn't have a whole black book of 700 people you could call up and say, hey, here's this project I'm thinking about. Are you in or are you out? I mean, you probably had to kind of curate the players that you ultimately ended up choosing to do this record with, right?
Yeah, exactly. So the project really got kickstarted when I was getting my master's in composition at Youngstown State University. I was studying under Dave Morgan, who's an incredible bassist, educator, and composer, just super knowledgeable. And he had this incredible gift of being able to help people find a spark of a potential idea or project. And, as I was in that program, I was thinking about how could I bring this folk music that I've been studying into the mix? How can I kind of do a composition or two based on this Italian folk music that I love, that I've been thinking about for almost 10 years? And so I did a couple compositions, and I brought them in to Dave, Professor Morgan, and he was like, wow, man, Anthony, this has like so much more intent and focus than anything else you've brought in so far up until this point. You should think about what you could do with this. Maybe it can be more than just a couple of songs, but this could be a project. And, being a sideman at that point for like 15 years, I knew that I did not want the responsibility of being a leader on my plate.
Said every drummer ever.
Yeah. But then the more I started thinking about it and the more I kept composing and this stuff just kept flowing, they even gave me my own ensemble at YSU where I could just workshop this material twice a week. It was an incredible experience. The momentum just kept building, and then over the 2 years in that graduate program from 2018 to 2020, all I was thinking about was who can be a part of this project. What kind of voices am I looking for? And the most important and integral of it for me was the voice, because I think that one thing that I've learned as a jazz musician is that when there's a vocalist, people tend to pay a little bit more attention.
Oh, you mean they're not there to see me do my really cool quadruple Rademachew drum solo? That's not what everybody's paying for.
There is definitely one person there to see that, but the other ones are not. So.
Right.
And then also, how can you convince someone that this is like Italian folk music if you don't have Italian words in it? You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah, I get it.
I mean, you could figure out some way to have some instrumental Italian folk music that's very modern, but it doesn't sound like it would be as successful. So the vocalist is Amanda Powell, and I had collaborated with her with Apollo's Fire, which is a pretty big Baroque orchestra in Cleveland. It's kind of its own organization, and they do a ton of different concerts. They're really amazing musicians that they pull from all over the country and the world, honestly. And I had the pleasure of sitting in with them a few times and collaborating with Amanda. And like her fluency in different languages and her ability to communicate within a song that like no one understands what the words are, but she was able to communicate flawlessly. with the texture of her voice and the way that she would phrase things. I knew exactly, like, she is the only one within like 500 miles of here that I think could be the singer in this project. And I am counting my lucky stars that she said yes and that she was down to be a part of it. And then the other pieces were kind of just as clear in my head. Like, I thought about it, as I mulled it over, as I weighed what are the important aspects of each of these roles, it just became clear. And I asked them one by one if they would want to be a part of this group. They said yes. We had our first gig. It went well. And then it's just been snowballing, where this last year, our first gig was in October 2020. And then at the beginning of 2021, I decided, well, I want to take this more seriously. I want to dedicate more time to booking and really trying to make this project happen. And we've played almost 25 gigs this year, which, for a band that's only a year and a half old, felt like a real success. And next year, next spring and late winter, we already have gigs in 3 different states.
Wow, man. That's amazing. And I'm saying that's amazing because I'm coming at it from you guys aren't going out and doing, I don't know, Katy Perry covers, right? I mean, it's
right.
Like, you're not a wedding band, right?
Right.
You're not a classic rock cover band. So the fact that it's being so well received should tell you you're on the right track. Is that how you see it? Because that's the way I see it.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how I see it. And I think that because it's folk music, that there's a certain humanness element to it that people relate to regardless of what language it is. I think that folk music in general, whether it be like what you were talking about, bluegrass or Irish music or whatever, I feel like it has a humanness to it that we can all identify with very quickly. Yeah. Whereas sometimes with jazz, the hurdle is the initial accessibility for an audience. And so I think what's really been magical about this is that even though we have some very inaccessible moments from a musical standpoint, because the narrative and the story is there from the folk music, it somehow makes it way more approachable for a very wide audience.
Yeah. And I think you have the other thing in the jazz world. And I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but if you ask the wrong question in a jazz club, everybody's like, oh my God, what an idiot. There's that thing too, like, oh, you're not hip enough to know what's happening here, and
right.
And I'm usually that guy that's not hip enough to know what's going on. And, in my opinion, there are 2 kinds of music, good and bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just know what speaks to me and what doesn't. And, taste is very subjective, but, one of my favorite artists today is a singer-songwriter named Jason Isbell. His music is rock, it's country, it's bluegrass, it's folk, it's all these different things. It's Americana is what we call it today. But I say all the time, he does not write songs for people who just want, that 2-minute pop escape, right? You have to think about it a little bit. And that's what appeals to me so much. And folk music, I say all the time, he's my generation's Bob Dylan. But that's the thing about folk music, is that it does strike such an emotional chord in all listeners. And to your point, no matter what language it's in, you get across what that emotion is. You can sit and listen to your new record and understand what the emotions are. I don't speak Italian, but I know exactly what's coming across in those songs.
Right. And that is, for me as the composer, that was like that's one of the most fun aspects about the compositions to me is I know And just so you know, by the way, even Italians have no idea what the majority of these songs are saying because they're in very regional dialects.
Yeah.
So we've had plenty of times an Italian come to the show who's like from Italy, who has no idea what people are what we're singing about, like from word to word. So I kind of love that because I think it levels the playing field for everyone that's listening that evening. But we also have like a lot of storytelling throughout the set. And it's, as a composer, it's interesting because it's like, okay, how can I compositionally try and also tell the story while the song's going on so that even in those moments where it's incredibly unclear what part of the story we might be in, there's something in the composition that's trying to reveal that to the listener.
Yeah, well, and you know, you're not the first to do it, obviously. You know, I mean, if you think about Led Zeppelin, they basically stole every, you know, slave spiritual and Delta blues song that there was and brought it to the white kids of America and England. You know, the Stones did the same thing. So, you know, we have a rich history of taking these really old folk type songs and modernizing them. And that leads me, I guess, to my next question is, you know, you mentioned the field recordings of stuff that you've heard. You know, how true did you attempt to stay to those versus taking some artistic license and recomposing, I guess, is the question I'm trying to ask.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's a mix. I don't want it to be the same every time. You know what I mean? So I try to let the moment that I'm in and the composition that I'm working on inspire those decisions. So on the album, you know, there's a couple of times where we sample the Alan Lomax field recordings. And so even in a couple of our newer compositions that we haven't recorded yet, that is an aspect of it, is sampling the recordings in different ways, you know, playing along with some of the recordings or using different sounds from the recordings as samples in the pieces. It just depends. Everyone is different, and I want it to try and, you know, speak to whatever the story is. Because to me, that's the most important part, is what is the story? And the launching pad is this recording of it that we have from 1954. So I'll listen to the song a ton of times to really learn the melody and hear, like, maybe what the implied harmony is, because many times these field recordings are just vocals. A lot of times there are no other instruments. And so you just kind of implied what the harmony is. It gives me freedom as a composer to add a bunch of wonderful things that I like into it, you know?
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, it's you know, it's an incredible recording. Talk to me a little bit about the recording process. Did you approach this as, you know, kind of a traditional jazz record and record everything live on the fly, you know, from the floor, or is it a mixture of things? Tell everybody a little bit about where it was recorded and how it was recorded.
Yeah, so we recorded in February of 2021. So we were still in kind of a dicey time with COVID, you know, spikes going up and down every couple of months and like not knowing what was safe. Being in a studio with a bunch of people in close quarters did not sound like the right move. So we were able to secure an old theater that my friend actually leads the music at the church that owns the theater now. And when I say old theater, I don't mean like one of those old performing arts theaters. I mean like an old movie theater.
Oh, I got you.
And so
okay.
it's got like the multiple levels and the seating that goes up. And since it's become a church, they've put in a huge stage. So what we actually did was we rented out that church space, that theater space, and we were able to position the entire band in that theater at the same time, but did it in such a way where, you know, I had the trumpet player was like literally 20 feet away and on a second level of the theater. And, you know, the guitarist was 40 feet away from him on the other side of the second level of the theater. And the bass and drums were on the stage, and it was really cool. And then the only thing that was really overdubbed were some of the special guests, and then Amanda overdubbed her vocals later. But we did all of the instruments together in the same space.
Man, that's amazing. That's fantastic. And you can't go wrong with those old movie theater spaces. You know, Stax Records proved that, you know.
Yeah. Oh, and it's so cool because, it's like 30-foot ceilings in there, and just the decay of the sound and the natural reverb that you get in that space, especially for the drums. I just really love the sound I was able to get from the drums.
Oh, yeah, for sure, man. I mean, they sound fantastic. But, I think it was Al Jackson Jr. said, the key to all those great Stax recordings was the sloped floor in the movie theater. He was like, that's what made it sound so good. So it's sonically, it's an epic sounding record. I mean, it really is.
Thanks, man.
You're welcome. So, you jokingly said earlier, I didn't do this for the money. What's the goal here? Ultimately, I know you want to get the record in everybody's hands. So tell everybody how they can pick up a copy if they choose to on October 21st. But what is the next step for you and the group?
Yeah, both fantastic questions. So first and foremost, the record is available through Shifting Paradigm Records. And so you can find them on Bandcamp, and you can pre-order now, even whenever this episode is airing. I'm not sure when it will be, but it comes out on October 21st, and you can pre-order it right now on Shifting Paradigm Records on Bandcamp. You can also find our music on most streaming services, although, as you know and you've alluded to in past interviews, that's really not the most sustainable way to support a band that you like. So we prefer that you order an album.
Yes, please do. Don't Spotify it. Don't Napster it. Whatever the kids are doing today, don't download it for free on the internet.
And we post quite a bit on social media and things like that too. So if you want to stay in touch with us and want to see what we're up to, Instagram, Facebook, those are great ways to stay kind of in touch with new videos that might be coming out, new singles, new releases, and things like that. And then as far as what my hopes would be for the project, what I'm telling people now is that, I'm still a sideman. Like, that's still 80% of my work is gigging for other people, and learning other people's music and doing that. So I want this to become more of a part of my regular gigging life, and I want this to definitely be something that I pour into more and more. But I think the advantage that I have that my career isn't dependent on this project is that, man, I'm open to anything. I am totally fine for however this ride lasts or doesn't last. And it's, like I said in the beginning, it's just joy right now. And that is the part that makes me so happy, is that there's no stress. I mean, other than, coordinating some of these gigs can be stressful, don't get me wrong. But behind the success of it, I guess, right? I'm not nervous. I'm not stressed. I'm not freaking out about it. I want to create something that people dig. And I've been extremely, extremely surprised and happy to find out that there are a lot of people that resonate with this project. So if that continues, man, I'm over the moon. But if it doesn't, that's okay too. And I think that having that balance and that freedom, that kind of zenness, if you will, about the project has in a different way been really freeing for me.
Yeah, man. Well, I will say this. You can damn sure bet that you are now the first call drummer for all Italian folk music projects going on worldwide. Because seriously, I mean, I think you could probably look, far and wide and probably not find too many projects like this. It's so unique. And, I say all the time, that's both a blessing and a curse, right? It's
sure.
It's a blessing that it's really unique. It's a curse that it's really unique, but it's, it really is, I'm looking for the right word to use here, because it really is a fantastic record that you can tell that it wasn't just something you woke up on a Wednesday and said, hey, this weekend I'm going to do an Italian folk record, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
You can tell that there's been some thought and some real emotion put into it. And man, I applaud you for that. I think
Thanks, Jamie.
You're welcome. I think it takes a lot of guts to do something so different and unique. But you never know, man. This may not be out of your system yet. You may decide, hey, there's another 30 songs that I want to do. I mean, it could, you could create a cottage industry out of this. I don't know, but
well, I mean, that being said, yeah, we're definitely composing. We're still composing. We're still pushing forward, and I'm going to keep doing it. We do have a second record probably looking like we're going to try and record next fall.
Fantastic.
That would be the goal.
Yeah, man.
So we'll see. But it's just, like I said, man, the ride has been so fun so far. I never thought that it would get as much traction as it has. And so just every step is like a complete blessing. It's been amazing.
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, do this for all of us. Give us all of the, Instagram, Facebook, the web address. Give everybody that so they can look you up.
Yeah, if you search our name, it's going to come up. Because believe it or not, there aren't too many names out there named Alla Boara. So Alla Boara is Alla, and then Boara is Boara. So you can put that on Instagram, put that on Facebook, you put that on YouTube. We got a YouTube channel. And then allaboara.com is our website as well. So, which we also have like an email list, and you can sign up for that. And we try not to spam people, send out like 1 or 2 emails a month with updates and new merch and things like that.
So you don't send emails about my expired extended auto warranty?
No. Oh, I'm sorry. No, we do that.
Oh, okay.
Sure. Yeah. I'm just kidding.
Oh, man. Okay. So second part of that, thank you for getting all the socials out there so people can look you up and all that good stuff. Are you currently teaching? I know you do a lot of gigs. So do you take students?
I do. Yeah. I have a fairly limited amount of time to do too much teaching, but I do some teaching at the community college over here. They have a jazz studies program. It's actually the same program that inspired me to start playing jazz. So it's an honor to be there working with those students. And then there are a couple private students that I have that, come to my house and we study here or Zoom or whatever. It's pretty relaxed as well. I travel quite a bit, so it involves some, some planning, but I love teaching. I particularly love teaching students how to teach themselves.
Yeah, man.
Because I think that's such an important part of it. Like at a certain point, you don't have a teacher anymore. So if you're not teaching, or if you're not learning how to teach yourself and how to enjoy it, then like, I don't know, then maybe, it's just not going to work.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's very true. And, some of the best drum lessons you could ever give somebody is to hand them like a stack of 5 CDs and say, hey man, go home and listen to these. You'll get it, So sometimes those are the best things, but we just want to make sure that if people are interested, they know how to contact you and get a hold of you. And, I think the record is just, it's unique and it sounds so good. And I love your passion behind it. So we're going to try to send some folks your way. You're welcome, man. We're going to try to send some folks your way, and hopefully they'll all check it out and, not download it illegally on the internet, but actually, send you $10 and get a copy and all that good stuff.
We would love that. And let me also say thank you so much. I mean, it's an honor to be on the same program where cats like Benny Greb and Daphnis Prieto and Rudy Royston. I mean, those cats are like some of my heroes, man. And so to have my name like within a 100,000-mile radius of any of those people is like an absolute honor. And I just love the way that you the culture that you've created with this podcast is truly amazing.
Oh man, thank you. But I just dragged all their names in the mud, for them agreeing to be on,
not true.
on this little show.
True.
As I said to you, I try to approach this as, a 13-year-old. What would I want to know from these guys? What makes them tick? Because I think at the end of the day, we all know about their amazing playing, right? Benny Greb is one of my favorite drummers. Like, I was in awe talking to him for an hour. It was amazing. But that guy just has a sense of groove that, who else has what he has? Nobody that I can think of. He's just amazing. But, we can go to YouTube and see all the playing, right? And break down every fill and all that stuff. What I'm interested in is, what is he thinking about? What makes him tick? What were the building blocks that got him to where he is today? And I think we can learn so much from that. And that's what I try to get across, and just have a cool drummer hang for 45, 50 minutes with all these cats. And, I'm just blessed that there are people that listen and care enough to care, right?
Yeah. Oh man, absolutely. I was saying before, it just reminds me of my favorite type of conversation after a gig, where you have someone that was just listening to the show and they loved it, and they have all these thoughtful, provoking questions about you and your music and your career. It's awesome, man. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. And thank you for taking time to come on, but keep us posted on how everything's going. If you do the second record next fall, here's your open invitation. Come on, talk about it.
Thank you, dude.
Yeah,
Thanks,
man. I tell people all the time, I've said this so many times. The good news is anybody can make a record today. The bad news is anybody can make a record today. The good stuff just gets lost in the noise, right? So often. And people say, oh, music is dead. The album is a lost art form. And I say, you're not looking under the right rocks, because it's there. You've just got to work to find it. And so many people don't do that. They just put it on, whatever top 40 station in their city, or, the 80s on 8 on Sirius XM. And that's all they know. It's out there, and I hope I can shed just an iota of light on some of it. So
thank you, man.
Oh, you're welcome, brother. Have a great one. Keep us posted on everything. We're going to send some folks your way, but thank you so much for taking time to do this, Anthony.
Of course, man. Thank you, Jamey. Appreciate you.
All right. Best to you, brother.
Thank you. Arrivederci.
All right, guys and girls, that's going to wrap up episode 148 of the Drum Shuffle podcast. Again, a million thanks to Anthony Taddeo for coming on, taking time out of his busy schedule to talk to all of us. Again, I just had a blast talking with him, so make sure you look for that release on October 21st when it hits the shelves. Visit him on all of his social media and tell him that you came from the Drum Shuffle podcast. I would certainly appreciate that. If all goes well, next week we're going to be joined once again by the great Doug Cosmo Clifford of Creedence Clearwater Revival fame. We have found he has unearthed another Cosmo's Vault recording, and this one is a barn burner, kids. So we're going to be talking with Doug next week if all goes well. So make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any upcoming episodes of the Drum Shuffle podcast. I ask you each and every week, the biggest thing you can do to help us out is share a link with a friend. That helps more than you'll ever know. And I am sincerely grateful to each and every one of you for listening to this podcast week in and week out. As always, we answer every single email that we get over here at the Drum Shuffle. That email address is thedrumshufflepodcast@gmail.com. Our web address is thedrumshuffle.com, and you can always find more information on me over at jameyeads.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We simply can't do it without you. I am eternally grateful for that. So until next time, may your head stay strong and your sticks never break. Cheers, everybody.